Hi, my name is Lynetta Linda, and welcome to the Penthouse Perspective. Today, we're going to talk about boundaries. Boundaries are such an important subject, and most of us don't realize it because we're really not taught how to have healthy boundaries or even what boundaries are or what healthy boundaries look like. So let's start with the difference between boundaries and walls. Okay. A lot of us put up walls because we're afraid. A lot of us put up walls because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle a situation. So our gut instinct is just to block it. Okay, this is a wall. And if you've ever tried to have a conversation with a wall, you'll have discovered that it's pretty impossible. So talking to a wall does us no good. The wall keeps us in and it keeps other people out. So we don't want walls. These are not healthy. Walls are always a result of fear, a response to fear, or a reaction to fear would actually be more accurate. When I'm talking about boundaries, what I'm talking about is essentially the perimeter around us, mentally, physically, and emotionally, that defines us. So we'll have boundaries that are mental boundaries, we'll have physical boundaries, and we'll have emotional boundaries. And once we've developed those, we will very definitely have energetic or spiritual boundaries, which is actually the goal. When we have healthy energetic boundaries, everything else falls into place. So why do we want to have boundaries? We want to have boundaries that are healthy because it enables us to move through life, to navigate the challenges of life without the stopping and the starting and the drama and all of those things that go with it. Okay. So boundaries are the way that we define ourselves. Do we define ourselves as someone who will participate in these kinds of behaviors or those kinds of behaviors? Are we someone who wants to hang out with people that think in this way or think in that way? Okay, so healthy boundaries will grow. Healthy boundaries will evolve and they'll be flexible. If we have healthy boundaries, that'll mean that it leaves room for the situation to grow, to improve, and to heal. Walls don't allow for that. So when we're talking about healthy boundaries, what we're actually talking about is defining yourself. You could go so far as to say, I don't eat seafood. That is a boundary. Or you could say, I don't allow people to speak to me this way. That is a boundary. And boundaries, when they're healthy, are going to be flexible. They're going to allow for growth and they're going to enable us to feel safe because we've got the tools, we've got the ability to protect ourselves. This is not a safe world, and we need to recognize that. Those of us that are walking through the world in naive innocence, thinking that, because we're kind, that somebody else should be kind, or because we don't think about doing unacceptable, unkind, dangerous, hurtful, harmful things that all happen when we cross a boundary, that because we don't think along those lines, that other people don't either. And that's just simply not true. That's very naive perspective. So we want to recognize that in order to be in our full power, in order to be in integrity, we actually must practice boundaries. Boundaries prevent us from leaking our energy. Boundaries prevent us from buying into things that aren't good for us. It's actually such a vast subject. I'm only going to be able to touch on some of it today. So why boundaries? Because boundaries enable us to feel safe. Boundaries allow us to protect ourselves. And boundaries also make room for us and the other person to grow. Sometimes laying a boundary is actually the most loving thing that we can do. When we're involved with someone and, for example, that person's behavior may not be healthy behavior, it may be unkind behavior. As soon as we become aware that their behavior is unkind, that it is not leading to unity, that it is leading to separation, as soon as we recognize that, a wise person is going to lay a boundary. And that boundary is actually the most loving thing for ourselves because we're not allowing that person to cross the boundary and treat us in a hurtful or harmful way. But it also, without the other person typically being aware of it, it'll also say to that other person, you know what, I'm not going to enable your dysfunction. I'm going to lay this boundary because I see that what you're doing isn't healthy, helpful, or loving. So I'm going to be the one, in your absence, your inability to see that you're crossing a boundary. I'm going to cross my boundary here. I'm going to lay my boundary here and let you know that I can't tolerate that behavior. Okay. And if we start to practice this, we see that what I call the four demons, The four demons can be spotted either in ourselves or in other people. And what are the four demons? The four demons are the victim mindset, the needy mindset, the righteous mindset, and the entitled mindset. So let's take, for example, a victim's mindset. Somebody who is a victim really believes deep down at the core level, typically the programming happens in childhood, they believe deep down that they don't have any power. So victims often don't lay boundaries and repeatedly ask themselves, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with the world? Why do these people keep taking advantage of me? And the simple answer is because we aren't laying any boundaries at that point. And there very definitely are people out there that will take advantage of us if we don't lay boundaries. Okay. Somebody who is needy is somebody who's going to essentially fish around energetically for an energetic match of somebody who's going to allow for them to be needy. So if I was, say, for example, if I was being needy and I wasn't taking care of myself, I didn't have healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries mean we're self-sustaining. Healthy boundary means we have integrity, that we're in sovereignty. Okay. If we are not practicing healthy boundaries and we're holding on to the needy mindset, we will actually cross other people's boundaries because we believe that they ought to be taking care of us. That mindset of needy says, I can't take care of myself. I need other people to do it for me. Now, the needy mindset is one that asks for someone to be a caretaker and someone to be a caregiver. Okay. So the needy mindset, let me correct myself. The needy mindset is caretaking. I'm going to take from you the ability for you to care for yourself, and I'm going to drain myself in order to take care of you. This shows us poor boundaries. When we're in our sovereignty, we become internally powered. We are not externally driven and we are not externally powered. And in order to be internally powered, we need to practice safe, healthy boundaries, which enable us to maintain our integrity. When we can maintain our integrity, we can then lay a boundary that says, I am not going to caretake of myself to take care of someone else and then burn myself out. And I'm not going to let someone take from me. Now, a lot of us, we struggle to lay boundaries because we're concerned with what external people think of us. Well, what will they think if I say, please stop doing that? Or what will they think of me if I ask them to, change this behavior because it's very hurtful? If we are externally powered, we're going to really struggle to lay boundaries because that external power system is actually where we're fed from. So if we are concerned with being in favor of other people, if we're concerned with the good opinion of other people, we're really going to struggle with laying boundaries. So boundaries are not something that get created overnight. Boundaries are something that are constantly evolving like a work of art. And boundaries are something that are highly personal. What a boundary is for me may not be a boundary for someone else. So in our boundary work, a lot of us are very concerned with making sure that our boundaries are being respected. But something a wise person's going to take a look at is whether or not we are respecting other people's boundaries. I know for myself that if I find myself starting to cross somebody else's boundaries, something's definitely wrong. And it's probably been wrong for a little while because I didn't even notice somebody likes to be conscious of other people's boundaries. I like to be sensitive to them. I like to tune into other people's boundaries. If it gets to a point where I'm crossing someone else's boundaries, then I'm not being sensitive. I'm not tuning in. A good example of this would be, have you ever had a really bad day and you needed to talk to a friend? In fact, I did it with a friend today. I called up a friend. I was having a bad day and I needed to apologize to that person and say, I'm sorry. This is not a pleasant phone call to be having with me. Is it okay for you to be talking with me about this right now? Because that person may not be able to stand up and say, you know what, I'd really like to hold space for you right now, but I just don't have it to give. So this is something that we really want to take a look at, because if we are allowing other people to erode our boundaries, there's a pretty good chance that we're eroding their boundaries too. Okay. Again, coming back to the four demons, the needy, the victim, the righteous, and the entitled. If we're practicing healthy boundaries, which use things like common sense, discernment, self-love, self-esteem, self-respect, if we're practicing all those tools simultaneously, we're going to have a boundary that is sort of like a living and breathing thing that will be able to evolve as our relationships evolve. We will feel perhaps the need for less boundaries the safer we feel when we're in certain environments, and we'll recognize in other environments or in other people's company where we may need to increase our boundaries. Okay. When we start to practice healthy boundaries, we start to see that we don't actually need walls, that walls are not productive. Walls don't help. And if you're putting up walls, I encourage you to take a step back and ask yourself, what am I afraid of here? Why do I feel the need to put up this wall that keeps me in and other people out? Because I guarantee you, where there's walls, there's fear. Where there's fear, there's a lack of awareness. A lack of awareness about what? A lack of awareness about who and what we are. Society has eroded our culture to such a degree that we don't realize that it's okay to lay personal boundaries. It's okay to say, my body, my mind, my space. A lot of us are being taught through external approval systems that if the external system doesn't approve of your boundaries, then there's something wrong with you. And I have to say, please don't buy into this, because that is a really sneaky way for the ego to get us to erode our boundaries and to give them away. One of the other things that we can do with boundaries, either to ourselves, allowing it to be done to ourselves or to other people, is that we'll wheedle and we'll needle. You know, like it was the straw that broke the camel's back, that kind of an idea. So sometimes when we are trying to take advantage of someone's boundaries, or we'll observe that someone is trying to take care or to disrespect our boundaries, we'll find that it might happen in little stages. Okay. And you might say to someone, please don't do that. And they'll go, what? All I did was, that's no big deal. What's your problem? At that point, if you're doing that, or if you're spotting somebody else doing that, I encourage you to lay that boundary fast, because this is somebody who is not in tune or respectful in any way of even a subtle boundary. And if they're not willing to respect your boundaries when they're subtle, then they're definitely not going to listen when you're saying it in a louder way. Especially if you're meeting someone, the first time we meet people, we're often so concerned with what that person thinks of us that we're not even really tuning in and paying attention to what that person's really revealing about themselves. And we can't see this because we've crossed our own boundaries in that attempt to get external approval. So we don't see through discernment and common sense, through non-attachment, we don't see what the other person might actually be trying to do, which is manipulate our boundaries, either subtly with some finesse and charm, or very directly, very obviously. We will have mental boundaries that get crossed that we may not spot right away. But if we're in tune energetically, if we're tuning into our body, if we're in tune with our intuition, we're going to feel that that boundary's been crossed. It's going to come across as what I call, bad jiggy jiggy. You can feel when someone's done it. If we are externally powered, we will not be able to perceive that that boundary's been crossed. So one of the first things that we want to do in order to start to build healthy boundaries is to build self-trust. Self-trust grows with self-esteem and self-respect. So let's begin with self-esteem. To hold yourself in high esteem is imperative in order to hold boundaries. Boundaries are designed to protect. If you don't hold yourself to be valuable enough to protect, then you will not have the inspiration that you need in the difficult moment in order to hold the boundary. And most of us don't realize this. In the work that I do, I'm consciously trying to observe other people's boundaries. And sometimes it can be exhausting because so many of the people around don't have boundaries themselves. So not only am I asking that people respect my boundaries, which is not always easy, people don't always want to respect your boundaries, but I'm also trying to discern and observe whether or not this person loves themselves enough to have a boundary in place. There will be times where people will disrespect themselves and make an offer to me, and I will actually very lovingly decline because I can see that they're eroding their own boundary, and I don't want to enable that. any more than when somebody is actually trying to cross my boundary, that I want to enable their behavior either. So that goes both ways. We can either be witnessing somebody giving themselves away without a healthy boundary, or someone trying to cross our boundary. Everything comes in duality, remember. Everything comes in shadow and light. So boundaries are imperative for protection. If we don't feel that we've got something worth protecting, then we're not going to be inspired to protect them. So let's begin with self-esteem. And I encourage practicing what I call a love list. And one of the parts of the love list is to write out every day the things that you appreciate about yourself, the things that you respect about yourself, the things that you're good at, the things that you feel good about. And it can be anything from your head to your toes. It can be, I'm really good at doing the dishes, or it can be, I'm a great driver, or I'm a really good friend. Anything you've got, start to bring it all into one place where you can get a really good look at it. All of these positive aspects of yourself, anything and everything, and I don't care what it is, anything and everything. Take a look at that great, big, beautiful pile. And if you're honest with yourself, there's always a lot there. So take a look at that big pile and see what it is that you're protecting. See the gifts that you've got that can be given away or leaked or stolen if we don't practice safe and healthy boundaries. See where we can actually incur karmic debt for ourselves by stealing from others or allowing them to leak and not pointing it out. It's kind of like seeing somebody out in public with their fly down. Are you one of the people that's going to say, hey, your fly's down? Or are you one of the people that's just going to look the other way and pretend you didn't see it? This is one of the big problems that's facing humanity right now, a lack of boundaries. And a lack of boundaries is a result of a lack of self-esteem and self-respect. When we have self-esteem and self-respect, we automatically, in a world that is based on the first law, like attracts like, when we start to respect ourselves, an automatic byproduct of that is that we want to respect other people. That is the way you see things from a self-esteem perspective. Healthy self-esteem. If the world would start to recognize that at the individual level, if we don't have healthy boundaries, essentially what we've got is a whole bunch of people running around without healthy boundaries. If we don't have healthy boundaries, we don't have common sense. We can be led astray. We can be taught or programmed into buying into something that's outside of us that is not good for us. I always recommend go to the guide inside. Don't believe me, I might be the biggest liar on the planet. Go to the guide inside. Check in with yourself. Are you practicing self-esteem, which is leading to self-respect? Do you recognize your worth? Do you feel that you're worth protecting? Do you allow people to cross boundaries energetically, mentally, physically, and emotionally? Because if you do, you will never have enough power to step into your sovereignty. These ways that we allow our boundaries to become eroded are actually creating leaks, like the leak in a boat. And if you've got enough of these leaks, again, the straw that broke the camel's back, if you've got enough of these leaks, you're actually going to find that you're not going to be able to get very far with your boat or your physical being. Okay? So we want to recognize, ask ourselves, this is another piece of homework. Are you honored by the company you keep, what you eat, and where you sleep? Is the company that you keep, are the people that you hang out with, is the relationships that you're in, are the relationships that you're in honoring who you really are? Do they respect you? Do they treat you with love and kindness? Or are they taking advantage of you? Are you honored by the company you keep, what you eat, what you feed your body physically, as well as what you feed your thoughts? Does this honor you? Is this a choice that enables you to hold a safe, flexible, healthy boundary? Are you honored by the company you keep, what you eat, and where you sleep, and who you sleep with? Okay, so in looking at our boundaries and creating boundaries, we want to start to ask ourselves as we start to move forward and begin to create healthier boundaries for ourselves, we want to start to ask ourselves, am I honored by the company I keep? And you might want to make a list of the people that you hang out with on a regular basis, including all your significant relationships, and sit down with yourself in the stillness and ask yourself, how do I feel on a scale of 1 to 10 when I'm with that person? Do I feel like a 10? Do I feel like it's just wonderful, it's terrific? Or do I feel a 1? Start to ask yourself, for each person that's on that list, how do I feel when I'm in this person's company? Do I feel good about myself? Does this person respect my boundaries and allow me to maintain my self-esteem? Or is this person eroding my boundaries? Are they constantly challenging me? Are they respecting me when I do lay a boundary? Are they hearing me? Are they changing the behavior that could be causing harm? Also ask yourself, is the relationship that I'm, feeling like a 2 in, a 2 because of the way I'm treating that person? Again, we want to remember that life is a mirror. If we have healthy boundaries ourselves, once we finish the cleaning up process, you could say, we will end up having pretty healthy relationships around us. And then the boundaries really only need to be held once in a while when somebody new comes in, or perhaps when a situation rises up that challenges boundaries, when we're tired and those kinds of things. So ask yourself, am I honored by the company I keep? Make a list of the people and check out, how good do you feel when you're with these people? In my books, anything less than a 7 is suspect to negotiation. I'm going to start to look at that relationship and take a deeper look. Otherwise, anything on a 7 and above is pretty good for me. That tells me that the person that I'm interacting with is respecting my boundaries, and I'm also respecting that person's boundaries. When we do this, it enables us to actually have healthy dynamic. It allows us to have a beautiful rapport of respect and harmony. I can think of several people that I have relationships with, and we face challenges, absolutely, the deepest and closest people to me. We face challenges, but we all have personal boundaries. We all have integrity as a result of those boundaries, and the boundaries as a result of the integrity. So that means whenever we face a challenge, whenever we face a crisis, my party, the people that I hang out with, they all step up to the plate. Sometimes relationships face really big challenges that cause us to reassess our boundaries. Sometimes we are in a relationship with someone that's been going along really well, and then all of a sudden we start to see that things change. We may need to reassess. People change, situations change. That's why it's such a good idea to have healthy and flexible boundaries. Perhaps there's someone in your life that you've now got to lay a boundary with, say no to, that you never had to do that before. You never had to do that with before, and it can be really challenging to do that. So again, back to practicing self-love and remembering why we're protecting ourselves. Okay, so are you honored by the company you keep? The next one, are you honored by the company you keep, what you eat, and where you sleep? So what you eat also pertains to what you feed your mind. What are the kinds of thoughts that you think? Is it time to perhaps start to put some boundaries around the ideas that you let in? Remember, random thoughts can be flying by. Random thoughts energetically exist in the air around us. If we're not cautious about the thoughts that we allow in, because we're not focused in the moment now and we're just letting anything come in without any boundary, we'll typically find ourselves in hot water or some kind of trouble pretty quick. So start to censor our thoughts, start to create boundaries around the thoughts that do not serve us and support us, the same way we start to set boundaries around the relationships that do not serve us and support us. And now I'd like to talk about boundaries around sexuality, which is a really, really hot topic. A lot of us believe that it's perfectly okay to go and have a relationship with anyone at any time, sexually intimate with someone. Sure, it's absolutely perfectly okay. You can do what you want. There's no sex police. However, you might want to start to recognize that if you're allowing somebody into your space, either a woman allowing a man to enter her, or a man entering a woman, or both parties being same gender, either way, you're entering each other's space in very, very intimate ways. And what you want to recognize is, just like the company you keep physically, sexually, you are now going to take on this person's healthy boundaries or lack of boundaries. Is the person that you're being intimate with somebody that respects you? And you'll know because they'll respect themselves. Is this person somebody who is willing to just willy-nilly jump into bed with anybody without any boundaries? Well, if that's the case, you might want to be a little bit discerning, because you could be letting something in that you really don't want to let in. And most of us are not sensitive enough to recognize, to perceive what's happening at the energetic level when we're sexually intimate with anyone. Okay, so boundaries are so important, especially sexually, because we remain connected to somebody that we've sexually courted with for the next 7 years, unless we consciously and deliberately sever the cords. We also connect energetically with that person's last 7 partners. So again, what we can't see is, something we might want to start to tune into, because it's something you can't see, but it is something that you can feel. So back to self-esteem, back to self-respect. Are you being intimate with this person? Are you hanging out with these people? Are you settling for this mental information because you feel that you don't deserve better, or you feel that, this is as good as it's going to get? I really want to challenge that. I really want to challenge that with good self-esteem and say, that is not going to be true. You do not have to settle. Absolutely not. We're only going to settle if we don't have healthy boundaries. So back to recognizing boundaries are about self-care. Boundaries are also about respect for ourselves and for the other party. Why do we want to practice boundaries? We want to practice healthy boundaries because it keeps us safe in a world that's really full of shark-infested waters. And for anybody out there that's thinking that the world is a perfectly safe space, and that because you're kind and loving that other people ought to be, or that because you respect someone's boundaries, they ought to respect yours. Well, this is a very naive and unrealistic perspective of life, and not one that's going to get you very far. So on the subject of boundaries, I'd also like to open up the subject of trust. When we trust ourselves, when we tune in to our energetic self through the intuitive body, we can start to feel whether boundaries are being respected or not. We can energetically perceive if somebody is really in sync, resonating with us or not. You might want to ask yourself if you've ever been in an experience where on the surface, somebody looked like they were being really kind and really loving to you, but underneath you could just kind of feel a little bit of jiggy, something going on. It's like, it just doesn't quite feel right. I encourage in moments like that to take a breath and go in a little bit deeper, because your guides, our intuitive guides, are transmitting information that is designed to protect us, care for us, and take us to the next level at all times. If we're not tuning in subtly to this energy, then we're not going to perceive what this person really means on the energetic level. Words can lie, actions can lie, books can lie, stories can lie, tell lie, vision lies all the time. Energy never lies. So we want to start to move towards self-trust, which means we are now able to, and increasing our ability to, act in our own best interest. That means lay boundaries that are healthy for us, whether other people like it or not. Remember, it's not our job to take care of somebody else's feelings about us. If somebody doesn't like a boundary that I've laid, and hopefully I'm going to be wise enough to lay the boundary respectfully, if somebody has a problem with that boundary, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to act in my own best interest and recognize that this person either chooses not to consciously or unconsciously is unaware that I am laying a boundary. I want to now practice discernment and decide whether or not I want to let this person in or let them go. Or maybe I want to put them in a holding pattern and say, okay, I'm going to let you in this far until I've taken some time to sip you. Don't gulp, people. Sip, people. Sip. Don't gulp. Take your time. When you observe that a boundary is being disrespected, take your time and observe, tuning into the energetic self, tuning into the intuitive body, and you will soon start to recognize whether somebody is really acting in your best interest or not. Trust for ourselves, self-trust, is to recognize that we're going to act in our own best interest. Trust with someone else is going to mean that you know that they're going to act in your best interest even when you're not there, or even when you're out of your mind. Are you dating somebody who's going to take advantage of you if you've had a few too many drinks? Are they going to spend your money, sexually violate you because they really aren't going to act in your best interest when you're not paying attention? I really respect the friendships, the relationships that I've got with people that have really healthy boundaries themselves and self-respect leading to integrity, because that means if I'm having a disagreement with this person, or a conversation, a difficult situation with this person, and I forget who I am, I don't practice my own self-respect in that moment. I love knowing that the relationships that I've built around me, I love knowing that these people are going to remind me, they're going to say, Lynette, what are you doing? This really isn't in your best interest, and I'm not going to take advantage of you simply because you may have forgotten who you are in this moment, or you may not be aware that there is a moment that could be taken advantage of. So trust is imperative. A lot of us, particularly in Western culture, are taught that if we meet someone and we trust them right away, that this is a really good thing and it makes us look so kind and benevolent. And I have to say, actually, it makes you look quite foolish. And it also shows that you are judgmental. If I meet someone and I immediately decide that I trust them, I've actually judged them. Now, when we trust somebody right away, culturally, we're programmed to believe that that's okay because you trusted them. That's a good thing. It's really no different than meeting someone and immediately feeling a sense of, lack of trust, that it's not safe. That is also a judgment. We don't recognize that whether you trust someone immediately, completely, or you don't trust someone immediately, completely, either way, this is a judgment. Either way, I would suggest choosing the middle way, which is sip people, don't gulp. Take your time, get to know them, discern over time. Actions speak louder than words. When we meet somebody, typically, most of us, we put our best foot forward. We want to put our shiniest self on, and we want to convince this person that we're something we're not. If we take time getting to know people, we will be able to save ourselves a lot of boundary work. Recognizing over time that this person, and ourselves included, we reveal ourselves to people. Most of us, however, are so interested in getting that person's approval, belonging to their club, or maybe we want them to feed us energetically because we're not feeding ourselves, taking care of ourselves energetically. So we don't bother to pay attention to these cautions that we ought to be paying attention to. We dive right in. We dive right in mentally. We gobble up what people say. We dive in physically. We don't practice boundaries there. And we dive in sexually, all because we don't have healthy boundaries, self-esteem, self-respect, and self-love. So back to some of the tools. Are you honored by the company you keep, what you eat, and where you sleep? Are you practicing boundaries consistently, or are there times when you're letting it go? Ask yourself, am I able to hold this boundary with this person, but for some reason I can't with that person? If this is something that you've got going on, then you might want to ask yourself, what's the payback for not holding the boundary with that person? Why do I allow my boundaries to be eroded? Or in the opposite case is, why do I continue to take advantage of this person? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're not going to feel good about it. And we're taking on a karmic debt for ourselves by not respecting the other party and not allowing ourselves to be respected by practicing healthy boundaries. Okay, so there's lots of work to look at here for anybody that's feeling like the boundaries they've got in their world aren't exactly what they want them to be. I'd like to remind too that you can't climb a ladder from the top rung first. You've got to begin at the beginning. And creating boundaries is something that's going to take time. It must begin with the process of self-esteem, self-love, recognizing that you're worth it, and so is everybody else. Can you imagine a world where we all practice self-respect and therefore have it for the others? Because like attracts like. Can you imagine a world where we don't have so many people taking offense, having resentments, taking things personally because we don't cross boundaries? We respect each other. We respect that we all have different ways of doing things. We respect that we all have different tastes and choices. We respect that we all have different tolerance levels. When humanity is ready for this, it's going to be a massive game changer. And guess what? Humanity's ready now. Are you ready to do your part? Are you ready to start to be a healthy boundary keeper, a healthy gatekeeper? Are you allowing your energy to be eroded, or are you eroding other people's energy? Few questions to ask yourself. Tune in. Pay attention to the energy first. You'll note that when you pay attention to the energy first, it never lies, that it will reveal to you everything that you need to know about what's going on. If you're externally powered, you're going to struggle to see with clarity what's really going on because you've invested in getting something from someone that required you to cross a boundary. Lots of homework here. So I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and I will be back next week with another subject. And I do believe the next subject is going to be self-esteem and self-trust. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.